Hello and welcome. Today I wanted to talk about the knees and making sure that they feel comfortable and safe in certain positions like pigeon, reclined pigeon, double pigeon, like any kind of ankle to knee or ankle against the floor while the other leg's behind position. The reason this can be an issue for some people, especially people that have a history with some knee injury or maybe some knee instability, or maybe they have joint laxity and so there's a lot of movement in here, is you're trying to lower your leg out to the side in any of those kind of positions. And quite often people will push on the thigh, or they'll just use muscular energy to send the knee away from the body. The problem being for people who have maybe some knee instability or history of injury, especially on this outer thigh, is because your ankle is fixed in space against this supporting leg. When you try to move the knee away, if you run out of hip rotation, the only place that has anything to give is the knee. And it might try to kind of gap a bit on this side, putting more strain or pressure on this outer side of the knee than the inner side of the knee. So there's a cue that people will often give, which is to flex the foot back or pull the toes back into what's called dorsiflexion, right? So the opposite of pointing your toes is dorsiflexion. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty as to exactly why this can help some people feel more stable, because the muscles that are involved in pulling the toes back don't cross the knee joint. What this does do on a bony structure level is a bone in the top of the foot gets wedged up between the two bones that are in your lower leg, and it creates a very stable structure. And what's stable down here is going to be stable higher up. But one of those two bones that you've now stabilized doesn't have really any impact on the knee joints movements. So it's kind of weird as to why it might be that helps people feel stable. I think it's just in general, it kind of gets your whole leg engaged in a way that you create a lot of muscular stability around the knee just by happenstance. But I am one of those people where when I go into a figure four and I let my ankle just be loose and floppy and I push away, I start to feel some funny things in that outer knee. And for whatever reason, when I pull my toes back and my leg feels much more stable, solid, as I push it away, I don't get that same gapping sensation on the knee. So this is a cue that while it may not be needed by everybody, knees are very important. They can be very susceptible to injury. So it is a cue that I like everyone to experiment with and see if it helps them and if it gives them that same sense of more stability. Because it could be a game changer for you. Your neighbor may not need it, but it might be really, really, really beneficial for you and keep your knee feeling safe and stable and not stressed too much on that outer side when you do positions like ankle to knee, reclined pigeon, normal pigeon, or things like double pigeon or fire log, which you can see my hip rotation isn't enough to let this leg go all the way down. Something that might help you understand how when we stabilize down here helps up here is if we look at the forearm. So the forearm also has two bones in it, much like the lower leg has two bones in it. We can recreate the effect that the bone in the top of the foot has to stabilize with our other hand. So if you have your arm out, palm up, and you take your other hand and you just lightly hold around your wrist, just the end of your forearm, and then you try to spin your hand palm down, you'll notice that not a lot happens, right? As opposed to when I let it go freely, those bones are free to move relative to each other. I can get my hand palm down. The moment that we have the end of the wrist, the end of the forearm stabilized with the other hand, that movement's kind of locked down. And you might notice that it also means that there's a little less movement up top as well. in the leg, that top foot bone wedging up between the two leg bones does the same job as our hand just did wrapped around the end of the forearm. So it just creates more stability through the lower leg. Like I said, it's funny that all that stuff doesn't actually cross the knee joint, but you can give it a try yourself right now, whether you're sitting on a chair or you're sitting on a floor. Bring yourself into ankle to knee. Let your foot just be lax. Send your knee away from your body and just pay attention very slowly. Just start to pay attention to any sensations that might be occurring in that outer knee. And then you'll kind of bring the knee back towards your body, try flexing the toes back, and now send the knee away from your body again. And maybe it feels a little different for you. You might be one of the lucky people where it's not an issue, and whether you point your foot, let it be lax, or flex your foot, it doesn't matter. But for some people, it really does make a difference, for whatever reason, to flex the toes back. So that is why that cue is often used in those types of positions in particular. That is why I think that it is worth trying, because knees are complex and we really, really need them. So we want to avoid injuring them. We want to keep them healthy if we have a history of injuring them. And that might just be something that makes yoga a little more accessible to you, a little more comfortable, and a little less straining on your knees.